This French suite is one of the best known of Bach's works. I haven't played it for some while, and the Rameau, although very difficult extended work, it's one of the great pieces of late Baroque keyboard repertoire. I love it. Rameau, I think, is uncontestably one of the big three, and I occasionally sit up and take a bit of umbrage when I hear everybody refer to Bach, Handel, Vivaldi. For me, Vivaldi is a strictly second or third rate composer, extremely prolific, definitely. And for me, the big three are Bach, Rameau, Scarlatti, and then probably Handel, and surely François Couperin. But this is strictly keyboard music, really. So there we are. So Rameau, being one of the giants of Baroque music, left a relatively small amount of keyboard music compared to either Bach, compared to Scarlatti, compared to Couperin. There are, I don't want to speak out of school, but I think there are 5 suites, let's say, of keyboard music. And the A minor is perhaps all around the best known of these, as it finishes with the famous gavotte and variations. And however, each movement of the suite is just a perfect distillation of what makes French music French and elegant and beautiful. And I think this suite particularly stands to be among the greatest of Rameau's music. Very appealing. You have a very elegant, ornate, slow gavotte. And I say slow because Rameau carefully tells you in his preface, most of the pieces in my collection are quick pieces, except for, in this suite, the Allemande and the theme of the gavotte. So the variations are basically rapid pieces. So you have this very elegant, noble, quite grave gavotte, and immediately the 6 variations go in another direction. It's what we would say is Italian-style variations, i.e. it's just rather simple tune variations. This does not resemble the Goldberg variations of Bach at all, which is harmonic variations. And in this case, in the Rameau, we always recognize the melody throughout the 6 variations. Each variation more brilliant than the previous. And there's another spectacular movement called the 3 hands, les trois mains, where Rameau, perhaps mimicking Scarlatti in a certain way, although really in his own style, imitates the effect of 3 hands at the keyboard by having the left hand continually crossing over the right, as if there was one hand down on the bass, the right hand playing its material, and the left hand very frequently then coming over to play other melodies. Very difficult, very funny piece as well. Bach is not exactly unique, but he is the most, shall we say, cosmopolitan of composers. I don't know if we could put it this way. He was extraordinarily well studied. He read whatever he could find. He certainly knew quite a bit of Couperin because he copies out some pieces. His wife also copies out pieces in Bach. Like, in fact, most of his German compatriots, Handel, before them Buxtehude, before him Froberger, studied music from Italy, from France. He brought the French style of Louis Couperin, the uncle of Francois, brought this to a different level, but mixed it in with Italian counterpoint in this very strict German style. And this tradition of studying everything continued and probably reached its apex through Bach. Bach himself copied pieces of François Couperin. For his children, his wife, Anna Magdalena, copied several pieces. This was considered great harpsichord writing. His son, Carl Philippe Emanuel Bach, mentions that his father knew the French style very, very well. And although the elder Bach considered the French way of fingering at the instrument somewhat antiquated, he had endless admiration for the finesse of this music. And Bach, for instance, had a very famous competition at the organ with the great French organist Louis Marchand, who left a couple of books of keyboard music. They are beautiful, but apparently, whether this is true or not, Marchand heard Bach practicing and fled. However, once we get to a composer like Rameau, we are looking at a contrapuntal mastery quite on the equal of Bach's own. I think we see in the extremely ornate style of Rameau's A minor Allemande, we see Bach looking at the style, for instance, but not only in the Allemande of his D major partita, a very French type of piece. It still feels very much like Bach, but where a listener can feel how much Bach was influenced by the French style and how he can deliberately choose to reference it when he wishes, or to go in an entirely different direction, say the G major partita, one partita away, the Allemande is anything but French. The gavotte is a dance beginning on an upbeat, and I can just show you on film, rum bum bum, rum bum bum, bum bum bum, etc. And so in the Bach gavotte of the suite, which I can voicelessly sing, rum bum bum ba da rum bum bum, rum bum bum ba di 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 da rum bum bum bum, etc. So we can recognize upbeat, bum 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 bum. In the Rameau, this is greatly slowed down, and we have yum bum ba di dum bum bum, and all of that with trills and mordents and ornaments and things. Bach takes what can be described as a typical dance suite, and this dance suite is codified, let's say, to consist invariably of an allemande, a courante, a sarabande, and a gigue. Now, Bach in all of his suites, the French suites are relatively small, English suites, so-called, are a bit longer, and then the partitas are the great suites. And all of these, with really no exceptions, there's one exception, a Bach big suite, follow this scheme, but then the frequent tendency is between the sarabande and the gigue to add some other movements. And these can vary between gavottes and bourrées. There's a louré, polonaise, and again, some see in the major collections of Bach suites. And to my way of thinking, there are three of these French suites, English suites, partitas. The French suites always begin with an allemande, I beg your pardon, and always end with a gigue. They follow this rather simple schematic theme. Quite simply, the English suites generally start with a long fugal first movement, and then, generally speaking, the final gigue, which for Bach is also a kind of a fugue, but in a gigue, in a dancing rhythm, are also more significant. And in the partitas, we have one more interesting feature in that in each of the 6 partitas, the first movements are greatly differing from more or less French theater-style overture, going to a real French opera overture in the case of the 4th partita, to a brilliant preambulum for the 5th, etc., to the famous toccata of the 6th. So there's no really fixed way that the suites must be designed. But clearly Bach is basing his compositions on a certain level, on music predating him by about 2.5, 3 generations. I could also say that although we can frequently feel his love for French music, this is not a given. A number of the suites feel more Italian in nature. Some of them just seem to be nothing other than Bach, frankly. And this G major French suite is perhaps one of those where each movement is really a little gem. The Allemande is quite Italianate, but features what's still a rather French keyboard technique that's called the style brisé, and that's broken style simply, and that is to create the illusion of inner voices and sustain by having overheld notes, particularly in the left hand, and the courante in this particular suite is very brilliant and Italian, and nothing like much more introspective and slow courantes familiar to the French composers that Bach is certainly also capable of writing when he wishes.